anonymous. So these are some of the challenges that happen when you start talking about governance. Now the interesting part is you will see something called code is law here, which is actually the crux of the whole governance of cryptocurrencies. But before that, the entire system runs on these client applications, which are running on every node, everybody's computers, my laptop if I'm connected to the Bitcoin network or any other currency. And collectively, the whole network creates an ecosystem for Bitcoin or for Ethereum or for any of the other 150 main cryptocurrencies. Now, this software decides all the critical parameters of the currency. For example, the total supply of money in this currency, the block size, hash difficulty, block rewards for miners, address creation validation, consensus policies, transaction fees. These are some of the technical areas, but all the critical parameters is decided by the code that is running in your computer. Not by bylaws, not by a charter, not by a document. So here we have a situation where, unlike a real world company, which must have certain documents to be incorporated, in the case of Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency, the entire thing is in the software that is running there. Now, so who controls the software? Who makes changes? Who can make changes to the software? So currently that is decided by a group process. So there's a mailing list and people kind of talk about it. In some cases there is a voting mechanism. But again, when you have anonymous entities, when I can have 10 different addresses of my own, the voting is not perhaps a perfect way of handling it. So the main point here is that if there is a major difference of opinion among the community, then you have what's called as a fork, a hard fork. So you divide into two. The Bitcoin has actually divided 2 times in its life into multiple currencies. And since all the policies of the currency is embodied in code, Lawrence Lessig called it code is law. So like a bylaw which sets out your laws, here it's the code that does it. So the governance of the currency is actually embodied in code, which is very interesting for many of the technologists and programmers here. So I'll let it go quickly now. Can you adopt a multi-stakeholder model here? What are the challenges if you try to do that? What is that you don't have the kind of multi-stakeholders of ICANN that can directly be mapped onto these groups within that we saw earlier. But we still see that there is the broad principles of sustainable development of the platform is still important. And therefore, different currencies have adopted different ways of handling this. In the case of Libra, Facebook's Libra, they have slightly diluted the decentralized model. They have actually a club, if you may, of people who pay $10 million to be in the club, and they become the so-called validators. They validate transactions. In the pure Bitcoin model, in the pure crypto model, there is no such thing. The whole validation of transactions is done automatically by the network using a process called mining. That's what this mining is all about. So we have these 2 different approaches, and the newer communities also have on-chain governance. Aragon is a digital crypto organization, not a currency only, but an organization that runs this entire thing on crypto, including appointment of people, including voting for decisions. Everything is done on the chain itself. But rough consensus, bottom-up, etc. are not. Bottom-up is automatic because the community is all about people with computers running these things. One person, one vote is not practical. You have a lot of ways to circumvent such a kind of rule. Vote is equal to the number of coins held is not really democratic. That's also a problem. A few vice members creating policy is also a problem because you have to take into account the aspirations of the larger community. So increasingly there is rather than have it by voting, there is some kind of a consensus mechanism that's used to kind of arrive at conclusions. Despite this consensus mechanism, there has been several splits of currencies, with one group going its own way and the parent group heading another way. So this is roughly I'll not go to this now, but this is roughly the challenges of trying to apply the multi-stakeholder model on the cryptocurrency world as of now. So back to you.
Raises the question, well, what is out there right now governing cryptocurrencies? what's in place right now?
Right. So, given the fact that cryptocurrencies were invented for bypassing the government, these are people who said we don't want the government. Cryptocurrency, the Bitcoin, the first of these was launched at the time of the peak 2009 financial crisis, and this is a way to circumvent the whole government mechanism. So, given the fact that these are people who are vehemently anti-control, anti-government, they do not want a centralized governance mechanism at all. So, the most interesting breakthrough that Bitcoin has brought in is that when you have a bunch of anonymous entities, the challenge was how do you have some kind of a management of the whole system. Now, who do you trust? If you're anonymous, how do you trust? So this is the main breakthrough. Now, if you look at digital assets, if you take music or an image, there are some interesting properties. So you have a chair here. I want to make a second chair. I have to go and buy the wood and the plastic and the paint and create a new one. But if you have an image, a digital asset, to make a second copy of that is instantaneous. It is zero cost. So the marginal cost of creating a new asset is actually zero on the online medium. Now what this means in the case of currencies, it introduces a new problem. Because if you have $1 digital dollar, if I can keep making infinite copies of that, then what is the value of that? So the major challenge that Bitcoin solved was this double spending problem. If I pay you one Bitcoin, I should not be allowed to pay the same Bitcoin to another person. This is called the double spending problem. And this is achieved by having a complete record of all transactions of every coin or a fraction of a coin online in a quickly readable manner, so that any transaction, the system goes back to see, does this person really own this? Or has he already transacted to somebody else? And this backup store of data, which is immutable once written, is called the blockchain. So the blockchain's main property is that once you write, it is public knowledge. All the files are public, but you can't alter a single bit. And that is locked using cryptography. And that is why you have cryptocurrencies. So to summarize, how do you have a governance mechanism when you have anonymous entities in a decentralized system? The answer to that is only by embodying this in code. If the code is immutable, the code tests everything. So it is actually a new model. So when you say code is law, it is actually not an easy concept to understand and internalize. But that is where the cryptocurrencies are heading now. And later on, there's something called smart contracts, which smart contracts are automatically executed contracts that do not require any human intervention. But the problem is, are these legal contracts? So as of now, we have a kind of issue there. These are not legal because the code do not yet, in all cases, recognize a smart contract. But these are some of the challenges, but interestingly, they are being addressed. We are not at a static point. We are actually overcoming one by one many of these obstacles.
Well, and there's great value in blockchain outside of the economic system. Contracts and cryptocurrencies are one, but
there are other
identification for
yes.
which is a big thing.
I do have a question because you said that crypto, Bitcoin is all the code is law, and as code, code changes, make it better or just fix boxes. And I know you mentioned something that there is a voting, a group of voting. But who enters the change? If you take it like an icon, there is a yana, there's one root,
Right.
and there's a process that gets to that point. Who makes that change into the code?
Thanks for the question, Ed. If you quickly look at the history of Bitcoin, in 2008, there was a paper published by somebody called Satoshi Nakamoto. Nobody knows who it is, as you are aware. That paper actually laid out the entire technical background of the whole coin ecosystem. Then, the same person presumably wrote a first open source implementation of this paper. It was released publicly. Still, we do not know who this person was. Or it was one person or a group, we don't know. There have been many claims in the. So what has happened after that is a group of well-known open source programmers have taken on this challenge of maintaining the code. So there are two kinds of changes that happen. One kind of change is just to make things more faster, smoother, more flexible, etc. The other is changing policy. So changing policy is subject to consensus of that group of programmers. But making something faster, better, efficient, etc., that is a lesser kind of an issue. So currently, to answer this question, it is controlled for Bitcoin by a group of known people. They are not unknown. Similarly, Ethereum also, the founder Vitalik is well known. His group is also well known. They control the code. But the point is, once you have code controlled by these known entities, it can be used by any unknown entity to participate. So there is still that little bit of a catch that the person who writes the code is known.
You have to trust that you can decide.
Marita?
Hi, yeah, if I had a lot of money that I had acquired illegally, and I wanted to launder, this sure looks like a good place to go.
Did you say that?
Okay, now the governments in the last about 7 years or so have got clued into this whole AML issue, anti-money laundering laws. So everywhere, every government has implemented KYC on the cryptocurrency exchanges. So these are points where the crypto becomes converted to fiat. The crypto itself is not controlled completely now, because they are a community process. But the moment you convert it to fiat currency, the government knows about it. It is reported to the government, mandatory. So they do have some kind of control. It is not absolute. I can transact crypto with you without the government coming to know of it. But you can't convert that to dollars. Then the government will come.
Has every country got that?
Well, yes. Every country is supposed to have. Supposed.
Okay. That's the key word.
So, like I was reading up online. So, the crypto started because of transactions that had to be done on the dark web, and that one. And second thing, are there any countries that accept crypto in their?
Okay, she asked two questions. One is, were cryptocurrencies invented for the dark web?
No.
You might have heard of the dark web. It is a place where you run Tor and you get into these sites which sell all kinds of contraband and weapons and counterfeit dollars and passports, things like that.
And Bitcoin.
And Bitcoin. That too.
So the cryptocurrencies were not created for this, but these sites quickly started using Bitcoin because they're untraceable. What is the second question?
Are there any countries that use it?
So in many places, including Canada, there are these Bitcoin ATMs that you can buy. Japan, for that matter, many parts of US. So if you look at the map of where in the world this is illegal and illegal, the developing countries have largely made it illegal. Either gray areas or outright illegal. The developed countries have taken a much kind of more accommodating kind of an approach. So in many cases they are legal completely. But the government wants to know. In the US case, the government wants you to report every year what is the current value of your crypto. Everywhere the governments want to know when you convert it to the local currency. But the crypto to crypto is not.
So when you say the ATM is when you convert it into fiat currency?
Yeah, from you give dollars and buy crypto.
Okay.
And in fact, a memo was leaked last week from the National Bank of Canada. Was the National Bank?
I don't recall exactly.
I can't remember which government entity it was, but that the government of Canada was looking at developing its own cryptocurrency.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So that's another very interesting turn of events. At least two major countries. Canada is one, the other is China. They want to have the digital currency, digital dollar in the case of Canada. This is not crypto really, but the crypto has many advantages. So you didn't go to Libra, but in Libra what happens is you use Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook. These all become banking applications at one stroke. And it becomes so convenient to kind of sit in whatever you're doing and transact money. So the digital dollar will bring in that convenience. So there is this, China has almost they're very unhappy with Libra for that matter, or for any other cryptocurrency. But they are thinking about the digital renminbi, which is their currency. So there is one of the fallouts of crypto is that governments are now considering launching their own digital money, not crypto money, but digital money.
Which is
It has got many advantages.
antithesis to
exactly.
the original intent.
So I'm trying to see how the crypto technology, what has to do with the, with the internet governance. I mean, how does it affect the governance of the internet? other than having transactions that are anonymous, but in terms of the internet, how does that affect the governance?
Board members would be paid in Bitcoin.
So I think the point there is, one of the, so when you say the economic uses of the internet, financial inclusion is a positive thing.
Right.
So financial inclusion, currently many parts of the developing world are unbankable because they don't have access to any bank.
Okay.
But now all of them do have their mobile phones, not smartphones maybe, but the basic feature phones. So in fact, what Libra proposed, of course all of us are kind of very wary of Facebook, but what Libra proposed was that we will bring in financial inclusion to the last mile, where people with a feature phone can transact using an SMS. Now if that happens, it's a very, so therefore, now the issue of whether crypto impacts internet governance is less clear, it may not, but if the internet governance rules apply to crypto, will it influence crypto? The answer is probably yes. First is that if you have these national firewalls, like the Great Firewall of China, then crypto becomes more difficult to operate. It becomes more difficult for crypto to operate. So internet governance does have, so fragmentation does have implications. Also another threat is to the DNS. Now Ethereum has just a few months back launched something called ENS, Ethereum naming system. Now the problem with crypto is that your addresses are very long. It looks like a random hash of numbers and all. You can't remember it at all. Same as the IP address problem. You can't remember an IP address. So can we attach this whole bunch of string to a readable, human readable, just like domain name system? That was the question that ENS addressed. So right now ENS is live, and it is a threat to DNS in that sense. Just like the dark web uses .onion URLs. So they don't resolve on ordinary. So these are all challenges that come up. They are still fringe, but the moment they become mainstream, it will start impacting our general system.
So,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, I was going to jump to artificial intelligence, but I don't think there's anyone talking about artificial intelligence.
No, we can ask.
We can make stuff up.
But,
Please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jacob. Yes, I would like to understand. You said something that governments are also launching their own digital currencies. So I want to understand the rationale, whether they are launching their own digital currencies to rival, let's say, Bitcoins and Ethereum and the rest. And I want to understand what's the main rationale why they are launching their own digital currencies.
So thanks, Jacob. See, I think there are several reasons for this. One reason is that the friction angle. So when you have cash, you have certain friction. You need ATMs, you need the whole banking system to circulate this cash, etc. The digital currencies take out the friction, and they make it very easy for you to transact things using a mobile phone. So that is one aspect. The second aspect is that currently the Bitcoin, many governments don't fully trust it. Okay. One reason is that it's highly fluctuating, the value. So Bitcoin has gone up and down from 17,000 to now 9,000. From 17 it fell to about 3,000 or 4,000, and then it's come up to 9. So it is the realm of speculators to get access. So governments are scared that if citizens start investing in this, they'll lose money. There'll be a social problem. So right now we have all these government currencies are stable coins. Stable coins are coins that are tied to a currency. So they don't fluctuate. So you have the advantage of a very agile, frictionless currency with the stability of the traditional fiat currency. That's what prompts governments to. So basically, inclusion, financial inclusion is one of the underlying areas.
Okay. Then finally, last question. If you look at the development, okay, do you think governments will eventually try to shut down cryptocurrencies, or they will just allow it to be as it is, or eventually they will just legalize it? I'm just thinking about the future. What do you think? Let's say forecasting or predicting. What do you think it will look like?
Okay, so I think there are the governments. There's a wide variation in the kind of government. You have authoritarian governments on the one side, and you have democratic governments on the other side, and all hues in between. So even very authoritarian governments like China have preferred not to try to ban this, because internet will always find a way to route around it. So bans are not easy. So they have not outright banned any of this. In the case of India, for example, it's a large country, they have said we don't encourage citizens to deal with cryptocurrencies because it's highly risky. So the point is that there will be coexistence in the long term, because you can't. This is an innovation, a technical innovation which you can't, by law ban. That's a very retrogressive. That's why Canada is thinking of launching its own kind of version of it. So there is a certain acceptance of that. So I don't think the outright ban is going to happen. They will be some attempts to regulate this some way, but that's not going to be very workable because these are regulation proof really, because they are software based. So that is a tension that will continue to exist. So I don't think there will be a ban in any case.
But there will certainly be interest in regulating,
yes,
or at least understanding, because if there's there's an underlying economy that isn't being taxed right now.
Right.
Governments want to be able to tax that income, right?
This is one
You were
question,
next.
one there,
and
one
then-
there.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so if you listen to Mark Zuckerberg's conversation with the US Senate, his pitching was, if we don't do it, the Chinese will do it. And he was saying, so that's clever. That's what he said. So, I mean, the RM said immediately put out a white paper, the Chinese acted. So here's the question, and it has to do with internet governance. Now, internet as it place it is right now, do you think without money, as it is, like some kind of digital money, do you think it will grow any bigger for any innovation to come up?